Okay. So I've started the recording and let's see what's going on with Excel. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. So if there are any issues with the recordings or getting access to the files, please let me know. Welcome, Miss Blama. We just got it. We just got it in hand. We just got started. Welcome. If there are any issues with the recordings or any issues with the files, just let me know by dropping something in the chat. We already have the lessons recorded for next week, and I will send you all out a notice to let you know what to pick up. Okay, so the agenda is the same agenda that we go over every week. We start off with Q&A, and then we're going to have the discussion where we review what we studied in the last session, and then that will be it. Next week we will have a session, but the following week, which is the 22nd or the 23rd, I will be out of town teaching, so I won't be able to have a session that week. But I will leave homework for you. I will leave lessons and homework for you all. Okay, so what we're going to be talking about today are the sum, average, min, and max functions, as well as unhiding and unhiding columns. Okay. Before I get started, are there any questions or comments about last week's lessons? All right, doesn't look to be the case. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first question, what does a sum function do? What does a sum function do? That's the first question. And you can feel free to answer verbally or in the chat. Okay, so we have one vote for addition. Any other responses? So what does a sum function do? Okay, that is correct. You use a sum function to add up numbers in a column, in a row, in a range, whatever the case may be. So in the exercises I've been giving you all so far, or I've been going over so far, we've been, doing like summing everything above or summing stuff to the left, but it doesn't even have to be that. When you use the sum function, so far we've been doing it like this: equal sum, open parentheses, and then we select a range of cells like this, where it says the first cell colon the last cell, right? And so this is how we've been doing it, right? But for the sum function, you can also enclose your arguments and separate them with commas. So let me show you a couple of other ways to do it. We can start with equal sum. open parentheses. I can select this number, put a comma, select this other number, put a comma. And it does the same thing. It adds up the numbers that are separated by commas. I can also do something like this. Select these two, right? Add a comma. Maybe I just want to add up tech. So let me make sure you can see what I did here. So you see I selected C2 through D2. It has a colon in there, comma. Then I come here and I select C9 through D9, comma. And then I can select a single cell or a group of cells, and then just keep doing that until I'm done. With the sum function, you can put in up to 255 arguments. So that's the sum function. Now, this next question is for everybody to answer. I think if the next question is the one that I think is coming up. Okay, so based on your school or your work or your personal budget or your personal life, if you do work for your church or whatever the case may be, give me a real world example of when you would use the sum function. And I've muted everybody, but you can unmute yourself or you can type in the chat and let me know. So just think about it. I'll give you a minute or two to think about it and just give me a practical example of you using the sum function. I will set the timer for a minute. Okay, yeah, as a sales agent, exactly. Help in doing your monthly report. Perfect example. Okay, and so exactly. In church, if you're adding up the amount collected, you will need the sum function. Exactly. Exactly. Great examples. Okay. So now, similar question. What does the average function do? Okay, I have to get the overall value. Okay. So what the average function does is calculates the average, right? So if I'm looking at my example here, and I have these numbers, right? If I do the average of these numbers, so let's say equal average. Okay, for each person, it tells me the average sale is a little bit over $537,000, right? Because even though this person only made 287, when you add them all up and divide them by the number of salespeople, the average ends up being 537. So basically what it does is it takes the number of salespeople, which is 15. It takes the total, which is 8 million. And if I take the total 8 million divided by the number of people, I get the average. And in this case, it gives me it just rounded it up to $178. That's all. Okay. So how would you use the average function? You can take the same example you gave me before, or give me another example of how you would use the average function. The average function is, anyway, let me stop myself. Go ahead, please. So let's say for average, what you could do is you could, using the church example, right? The way you could use the average function, every week you add up the amount of offerings you get. You could say, in the month of, you could take a look at the average. So you can say across the year, the average amount we get every week is X number of dollars, right? So you could take for the whole year, 52 weeks in the year, take the amount of collections divided by 52. This is the average amount of collections we get each week. And so you would know from week to week which one is above average, which one is below average. And it can help you sometimes to see some trends. You can also calculate the average on a month by month basis. And then you can say, like January on average, we get twice as much in offerings as we do in February. Same thing with the monthly report. If you're a sales agent and you're selling, let's say you're selling computers and gosh, I don't know. I'm drawing a freeze. My brain is freezing. Televisions and all of that. You could say, okay, my average profit for computers is this. My average profit for television is that. Maybe I need to sell more televisions because it looks like on average, my profit for a television is higher than a computer. And so it's not just about, like calculating the answers, but also making decisions based on what the answers happen to be. Okay. So calculate the sum and average on the attached spreadsheet. I think we kind of went over that, but again, we just start with equal sum open parentheses and just select the cells that we want. And then once we've selected all the cells, we hit the enter key and that gives us the sum. Same thing with the average. Now we've talked about autofill quite a bit. And I know I demonstrated this to you in one of the lessons, but just to emphasize it, if I want to autofill this formula over here, I can just come down here to the bottom right-hand corner and just drag it over to the right. And it copies the function over. But remember that it changes. So if we started in this first cell, it was averaging column C2 through C16. Okay, we autofill and dragged it over to the right. And now in this particular column is averaging D2 through D16. Because we copied everything over one column, it adjusted the address of the cells one column. Okay, so going back a couple of lessons, what is that called? The fact that Excel automatically knows when you copy a function over to copy over the reference, what is the term that refers to? And I'm going to wait for about 45 seconds, give you a chance to see if you remember that, because that's one of the things I said is going to be an important concept in Excel. So I want to introduce it to you early so you get used to it. You get used to that term. It's 2 words. So what is that called? Okay, I will give you the second word. The second word is reference. So if I give you the second word as a clue, can you remember the first word for that term? Anybody? So again, is blank reference. What is that term? What is the term? Take a stab at it. Just make a guess. Okay, so I will ask that question next week. I'm not going to tell you the answer, but I will ask that question next week and see if you have the answer. Okay, so my next question is, if you use the sum function on a range of cells that includes text and numbers, what will happen? So this is my example here, right? This column includes numbers and text. If I use the sum function under here, what will happen? If I would come to cell C17 and use the sum function to add up these items, what do you think will happen? Ah, good guess from Miss Bass. Exactly. So we got one guess. It said it will only add the figures and ignore the words. Okay, any other guesses as to what it will do? That's exactly what will happen. So let's test it. And that's exactly what it did. Added it up. So let's see what will happen if we try the average. What do you think will happen if we try the average in a column that has numbers and text? So the thing is the same. Let's see. So we're going to try it and see. We're going to say equal average these numbers. We're going to do the average on these numbers, and then we will test it to see if the answer is correct. Okay. So the average, it says the average is 498,713. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to count. Remember, oh, you guys don't know this yet. So I'm going to count the number of figures that are in this column. So even though we have 15 names, there are only 13 numbers, right? So we receive a preliminary answer of 498,000. So I'm going to go ahead and say equal this total divided by And you guys haven't come to this part yet, but I'm just going to format it so it looks the same. And yes, it gave us the correct answer. It does do the same thing. So even though there are 15 blocks, because there are only 13 numbers, it only calculates the average of the 13 numbers. Okay. And this is something I want to show you. I know it's hard to see on your screen, but just look down here as I'm doing stuff for the next couple of minutes, the next minute or so. Look down here on the gray bar on the bottom of your screen, okay, where it says display settings. When I select these numbers, if you look down here on the bar, you see what happens? It gives you some preliminary results. Let me see if I can zoom in. Okay, so maybe now you can see it. You see what happens here at the bottom? It gives you it's not calculating anything and putting in your worksheet. It's just giving you a preview of these numbers. It's saying the average of the numbers you selected, the count, the numerical count, and you'll learn about that next week. Minimum and maximum and sum, it gives you a preview of those answers. So this comes in handy. I used to do this all the time. You know, if somebody calls me on the phone and they ask me, let's say somebody call you, you're in the middle of doing your numbers for your church. Oh, thank you, Miss Bass. Thank you very much. You're in the middle of doing the numbers for the church, right? And they say, you haven't added the sum up yet. And they say, how much did we get? You can say, well, I haven't added up the numbers, but what we're looking at right now, and you can just highlight the cells and look at the bottom, and it gives you a preview of your answer. So you can say, okay, what we're looking at right now is, you know, X number of dollars, but I'm not finished. When I'm finished, I will send you the final report. Okay, so that's sum and average with text. Okay, so let's move on to the next discussion point. Okay, so I kind of already answered this, but the question is, how would you use sum or function in non-contiguous cells? So what do I mean by that? I mean that on this sheet, I want to add up numbers, but I only want to add up the numbers for tech for Q1, and then tech for Q2, as well as average tech for Q1 and average of tech for Q2. Okay, so for my first example, if I over here in cell G2, if I wanted to put a sum of Q1 sales, how would I do that? We know we're going to start with equal sum. Okay, so what is the formula that I will put? You mean I can do this, click this to bring up the function? Okay, got it. And then at this point, what do you want me to do? Remember, I'm adding up the numbers for Q1, just for tech, the sales that are purple. Exactly, you got it. So if I have it here, I've brought up the function arguments bar. I can click this first number, come down here next to number 2, click the second number, come down here next to 3, click the third number, and then when I'm finished, I click OK, and I have my figure. And I can do the same thing for average, right? If I come here and I want to do average for Q1, start to bring in average, click the first number, comma, second number, comma, third number. And then when I'm done, and I can keep clicking, just so happens we only need 3 numbers. When I'm finished, I hit enter, and that's my answer. Now, as we progress in the class, we will learn a function called sum if. I'm going to type it in the. You will learn a function called sum ifs that will actually do this, and there's also a corollary called average ifs that will actually do that a little bit more, what's the word? A little bit more elegantly than you having to actually specifically select cells. But where we are right now, this is exactly how you would do it at this level. Okay. So if I only wanted to show company and Q1 sales columns, if I only wanted to show this column A and this column C, how would I hide B and D? And then once I hide them, how would I unhide them? Yes, so great point. Yes, you could also hold down the control key. Oh no, don't worry about it. I'm waiting on you to do that as well. Yes. Okay, so if I only want to show company and Q1 sales, how would I do that? And I'll wait a couple of minutes because I know the text is slow. So hide, yes, I'm sorry. So if I want to hide column B and column D, because I only want A and C to show, how would I hide those columns? Hover over the column letter. Okay, I did it. Click. All right. What's next? Remember that you right click and then there's hide right there. Exactly. Okay, now that I've hidden column B, I changed my mind. I want to bring it back. How do I do that? Yes, select both columns. Okay. Okay, yes, right click, and then you will see the option to unhide, and then you can unhide. Sometimes, let me try something. Sometimes, if you can see the little line in between and you double click like this, it will bring it back. Okay, so let's go. I think we only have a couple more questions left. Oh, that was it. That was my last question. Okay, so let's move on to logistics. I got to change this slide because I don't know if you saw the message. We're just going to do the 10 p.m. class because a lot of people don't show up for noon. And so it looks as if that time doesn't work for people. So we will only do the 10 p.m. You will have videos that will be released to you guys by tomorrow, by noon tomorrow. And you will have a homework that you have to turn in. So for next week, the lessons you're going to go over are going to talk about count, count A, and count blank functions. And then we talk about today and now functions and auto sum. Because you have quite a few lessons next week, I'm going to have the homework to be due on Monday the 22nd. So I'll give you an extra week to do your homework. And again, the 23rd, we will not have a class. So tomorrow you'll get the drop of all these lessons. You have a week and a half to get it done and turn in the homework. And then we will meet again on the, what would that be? The 30th of April. But we will have a meeting next week. We'll have a meeting next week. It's just that your homework is not due next week. I hope I haven't confused that too much. And then after that set of lessons, then you have another set of lessons. These lessons will be very light, talking about the formulas tab and reverse engineering functions. But next week, you guys are going to get a drop of quite a few lessons. And that'll take us through the basic functions and formulas. When we're finished with that, you all will know when you go for a basic Excel test, most of the functions and formulas that you're expected to know. Okay, any questions? Thank you so much for attending. I appreciate you being here. Do you have any questions for me before we break for this week? Okay, like I said, I appreciate you coming and showing up. Those of you who are participating and hanging in there, I'm trying my best to try to finagle some things to kind of help you on your Excel journey, to help you on your journey in your career. So hang in there, okay? You working on your end, I'm working on my end as well. Okay, thank you so much. Have a good evening. See you next week. All right, bye-bye.